Hi guys, welcome to Director's Comments for Home is Where the Hearthstone Is. This video really is just to give you an idea of what went into the making of the film, all the things that kind of happened in the background, so I hope you enjoy. So the first thing to do within the project is create a treatment. Basically what the treatment is, it's a loose draft of what it is we're trying to accomplish. So for myself, I basically came up with a 3-act story, gave a rough idea of what I was trying to do alongside all of the financials, so I had to go away and do research on that, insurances and things like that. Also sourcing the actors and things like that. So once that was done, it was all put together in a pack, and then I had to deliver the pitch itself. So the pitch itself was actually delivered to some UHI staff. They kindly sat in and acted as the investors. This was a really good experience, and I've done this sort of thing before, but this time was a little different because I did get a lot of interest and a lot of feedback, specifically from one of the staff. She's not a gamer, so she didn't really understand how this would sit in the market. Some of the questions that were raised kind of brought this to light, and what I did actually do was explain that the Warcraft movie is due to come out soon, so I'm really kind of trying to kind of time it in line with that, because that obviously will widen the exposure for the film itself, which I think would do it some good. It's also a story unto itself as well, so you don't necessarily have to be a gamer to understand what's going on. You could just take it for what it is. But for those who do play the game, I think they'd appreciate it a little more, because they're obviously going to understand the areas that they're in and a little bit of the backstory as well. So the next stage in the project is the pre-production. Basically, the pre-production is everything that happens in the background paperwork-wise. So we're looking at the things like making sure the actors are available, making sure that they've signed all the relative paperwork they need to sign, making sure that the insurances are actually in place. For this particular project, we didn't have insurances, but obviously we did it as an academic exercise so that we could demonstrate that we understood that this is how you would do it in the real world. So once everything's in place and we know everything's going to be going ahead, I then moved into the game itself, went into the virtual world, and did a recce. So the reason for doing the recce is to make sure everything's going to work to the plan that you've got. I went and checked the individual areas, and that was fine, but what I did notice, and what was good about doing the recce and what showed that it was worthwhile doing it, was the fact that one of the travel sequences was going to be really, really long. Now, the reason why I initially didn't pick up on this is because normally within game, you'll actually fly where you want to go, so you can take a straight line to where you want to go. Because that would have detracted from the story, I'd opted obviously to keep everything on the ground. I hadn't allowed for the time that would take for some of the travelling sequences, so then that made me have to think about, okay, so how am I going to basically blend this? So shorten the actual travelling sequence down, but still blend it and make it look realistic without sort of just cut to the next part. This is quite a challenge. I think I pretty much got it, but I'd like to go back and refine it. That's something for the next project that obviously I'd maybe have to look at. So once all the recceing's been done and we're quite happy with everything there, we then moved on to the storyboarding. And basically what the storyboarding is drawing out each individual scene with text notes to support. And the reason for doing this is, if for any reason I had to hand over to another producer or director, let's say I fell ill, something like that, or for whatever reason, they can basically take the story and produce something similar to what I'm trying to produce. It's not going to be exact, because every director and producer is going to have their own flair and style, but they get the basic idea of what I'm trying to achieve. So really that's the main reason for storyboarding, and it is an important part. As with any project, planning is important. If you get that bit right, it makes everything else so much easier. So next we move on to the production stage. This was quite interesting, because when you watch a film, you watch it beginning to end, and this isn't how it worked when actually putting it together. The reason for this was actor availability. Because the guys who were helping me with this were all volunteers, obviously I had to work around their schedule. I was aware that I couldn't push them too hard, so this was something I think in a real world situation where an actor's being paid, they would be on set at a given time. Obviously they'd be given information as to where they need to be and what it is they're going to do, so I had to kind of adapt to that a little bit. That in itself was fine. So because of that, basically what I started with was the intro and the outro. The intro, as you can see here, was actually created in Adobe After Effects, and the reason for using this was because I had more options and I think it just gave me a nicer and cleaner finish. Once that was complete, I then imported that into Premiere Pro, which was the software that I used to actually compile the film itself. So then we moved on to the individual actors' parts. Because Pesha was available first, obviously took her parts and recorded them first. So as you can see here, we've obviously got the sequence from the beginning of the film within the virtual world. It was an interesting thing because what I had to do was actually go and add all of the sound later on. So where you have the individual sounds of the sheep and everything else sort of being added in her voice, that was all added later on. So we had to kind of sync everything up. The voices were actually recorded separately, although we did have to time out the emotes of the characters, which is shown here, so that everything kind of synced together and worked well. So another thing that had to be thought about was how we were going to transition from one scene to the next. There's a number of ways this can be done, and it depends on what it is you're trying to achieve as to which transition you'd use. So the first transition, as you can see here, is basically a straight cut. This is really kind of an interview style cut. The reason for doing this is because we're moving from one person to the next in a set dialogue. So that kind of works really, and again, if you were to watch the likes of the news when they're interviewing, that's kind of how they do it. They can use a wide shot as well, but for this I think this worked really well. The next transition that we use is a cross dissolve, and the reason for using this is to allow us to move from one camera angle to another and basically stay within the same sequence. This is something that can be used to great effect. The last one that I used was basically a fade to black, and what that does is it kind of finishes off that sequence and kind of informs the viewer that we're moving on to the next stage of the story. So again, it's quite a powerful effect, and if used correctly, works really well. So the completed video was a little different from what I'd initially planned. Things like this are going to happen along the way, just with it being a creative process. One of the things that changed, and I think it changed for the better, was the use of Tatin, who was the rogue in the background. He was a bit of a comedic character, just a bit of comedy effect. Initially there was going to be no voice for him at all, but doing the research I actually found some sound files which allowed me to then use those files to kind of give him a bit more of a presence rather than just having him in the background. So that was one of the things that changed. There was a number of things that changed throughout the process, but it kind of ended up where I wanted it to be, so really pleased with the final result. So having finalised the film, I actually spoke to some of the viewers, some of the gaming friends, just to get some feedback and to see how they felt it went and if they felt it was a viable story. I had a lot of positive feedback. It was really nice to hear, but there are a couple of things that I would do differently next time. One of the things I'd like to do is spend a bit more time with the actors themselves, just to try and calm the nerves a little. One of the actors actually commented that she had a really flat voice, and I think that was down to nerves, so that's something where, given the time, you need to kind of settle people into it a bit. So maybe doing some more dummy runs, which kind of leads to the next point, which would be that I'd like to do more takes of the same sequence, because it just gives you some more to play with, it gives you more footage to play with. Again, because I was starting to run out of time, it was something that I felt, okay, I've got enough to sort of make something good here, but next time I'd like to take a bit more time. So overall, I'm really happy with the final outcome. It's the first time I've really attempted a project like this, so it was interesting to see how it all works and how it all comes together and the problems that you can have going through it. Certainly at one stage I felt, why am I doing this? It just didn't feel right and I wanted to start again, but you know, I persevered, worked through it, and I think it finished really well. I've actually had some questions from the viewers themselves, from my gaming friends, and they've actually asked if I plan to do some more videos because they really enjoyed it and would like to see more. And for me, that's a really validating thing, because it kind of shows that they are happy with what I've made. And really, that's what I set out to do. It was just to create something engaging and entertaining, and I think I've managed to do that, so I'm really happy with the final outcome.